Today, I'm going to show you how easy it is to build forms with custom validation using React hooks. Custom React hooks are a really simple way to reduce the amount of lines in your code, and you can reuse a lot of your logic throughout the rest of your app, which would normally be copied and pasted. And luckily, since forms all work the same way, you can basically make a custom hook that can be used on any form throughout your whole app in a very simple way. So with that, hit that like button, subscribe, and let's jump right in. Make sure to watch the video through to completion. Somewhere in the middle, we'll be adding in our custom React hook, which is going to make your life so much easier. So in doing these problems, I like to emulate that I'm in an interview setting. And that basically means I want to be able to write out the mental model first, I want to pseudocode, and then I want to code. And I want to do this all aloud to get really good at practicing for interviews. And this is something that I've stressed throughout some of my previous videos, and I want to continue doing that forward because I think it's a really important skill when you're coding, especially to be able to communicate your thoughts aloud. So if we jump right in, let's figure out what we're building. So we're going to be building a simple sign-up form. And this has two input fields and a submit button. And the first field is going to be an email field. The second field is going to be a password field. And then this is going to be a either sign up or submit button. Let's just click sign up. Okay, and basically here we need some kind of state management, and we need to store each of our pieces of information in the state management. Now, this is going to be S for state, and we're also going to have an errors state management where we're going to check if we have errors. And if we do have errors, we're going to then display them underneath here. So this is kind of our ERR for error and ERR for error. So we want to be able to enter here and here and store them in our state. And on submit, we want to check if there are errors. And if there are errors, we're going to basically display them here and here. So now that we've got that out of the way, let's jump into thinking about how we're going to build this. So I've booted up a really simple Create React app, and I would encourage you to either follow along by creating your own Create React app or using something online like a CoderPad or anything that allows you to emulate React code on the web. So jumping in, we have our app component. This is just rendering a form right now, and our form component is rendering our hello world. So let's think through this and figure out what we need to do. So we need to create a form element, and inside this form element, it has a label / input for email and a label / input for password. And also we have our sign up button. So that's pretty straightforward. So after that, we need a way to handle changes, which will be a handle change function, and then a way to handle submit. So this is going to be our V1. We just want to be able to submit information. Secondly, we want to be able to handle errors, and we want to show errors if there are errors. So if there are errors. So in here, we can add our form, and inside that form, we want an input, and before that, we want a label. So this label will be email, and input will have a name of email and a type of email. Now, on our form, we can say no validate, and this basically means that the browser itself, if you put type of email in an input, and you type in a non-email, and let's take out this no validate, the browser will basically show you that it wants an email. So we can add no validate here because we'll be creating our own validation. So no validate, and now we have this. So what we need to do here is we want to wrap this in a div, and then we want to wrap the input as well as the error message in a div, which we'll be adding later. So we know that we need to handle errors, so we'll just say error message here, and we will comment that out for the future. So we have email as our label and our input value here. So now what we can do is we can just copy this, and we can do the same for password. Okay, and then lastly, we need to add our submit button. So this will be a button and the type will be submit, and we will just name it submit. Perfect. So next we need to pretty much have the form, label, sign up button, and all that good stuff. So next, let us make our handler function. So basically, whenever you enter into forms, you want to be setting this to state and then resetting the value of this from the React state. That's a pretty common pattern throughout building forms. So we'll do that using a hook, and we can use the use state hooked from React. So here, say const values and set values and equals use state. And what we can do is we can initialize a default state. So we can say email equals an empty string and password equals an empty string. This just gives us a really easy way for our app starting off to set default values. And basically what this does is this useState returns a tuple. We're basically destructuring this and pulling out this object right here as our values constant, and then set values is a function which is a setter which will be used to update this object. Let me zoom out a little bit. Okay, so with that we now have access to our values. Email and password are nothing, and what we can do in here, we can say value equals values.email, and then we can do the exact same thing to set the value for password, and we say password. And now we need, so we have a way to set these values, and next we need a way to do a change event. So what we can do is write a function called handle change, and this always takes in an event. So implicitly, when you type in here, it'll send its handler function an event. So we can say event, we'll just make it really clear. And what we can do is we can console.log this event. And generally, when you're pulling off specific attributes related to an input, you can use event.target. So you're grabbing the target of what you're currently in and typing in. So we can say event.target.value and console.log event.target.name. We'll need this for the future. So basically the name is being pulled from right here. So the name will always be email, regardless of the value will be if you're typing in the email field. The same thing goes for password. The name will always be password, no matter what password you're typing in. So let's jump over here, and the last thing we need is the onChange method, and we're just going to be passing in this handle change function, which is a callback, and implicitly it passes in this event object to our handle change function. That's why we're calling it as a parameter here. So let us add this down here as well and go in. And perfect. So we have email, we're typing in all of these, password, we're typing in all of these, and now we haven't updated our state value. So right now the state is always going to be an empty string, so we can't type in more than one character because it just keeps resetting it to an empty string. So now what we need to do is we need to set values here. So we're using our setter function, so set values, and in this we need to basically copy the rest of our object that we're not updating, and then we need to just update the exact name or value that we want. So what we can do here is we can use the spread operator, which will iterate through our object once we pass in values, and it will copy each key value pair into this new object that we're creating, which is right here. So an easier way to see this is if we get out of here, this is actually an object that we're passing into set values. So what we're doing is we're grabbing the key value pairs from here and spreading those into this new object. And then what we can do is we can update, we can pass in a new key value pair to just update what we're dealing with. And this is really handy. So since we already have the event.target.name, which is email or password, and then we have the event.target.value, which are the two values here, we can easily update our object in state. So what we can do here is, this is a way to pass in a variable for updating your key name. So what we can do is say event.target.name. So this will set the name equal to the key. And then what we can do is we can set that equal to event.target.value. And this is really great because it was a very clean way of copying our old object and then passing in the new value and overriding that. So we never actually mutated our previous object. We copied it and then updated what we needed and then set that back to state. So we can really quickly clean this up by using a destructuring ES6 way of doing things. So we can say const, and what we can do is we can just pull out name and value from the target. And what this will do is this will allow us to basically cut off this and make it really, really clean. So this makes a lot of sense, right? So we're pulling name and value off event target, and then we're just passing it in here right now. We're setting the key equivalent to the name and the value equivalent to this value up here. And if it's already in our values object, it's going to override it down here and then reset the state. So now we have controlled components. And you type in here, it updates in React, and then it forces the value back down into here. So what you're seeing is what is in React state. Okay, so that's step one, and step two is we want to make a submit function. So if we go down here, we need to make a handle submit function. So we'll say handle submit, and this will take in an event. Okay, so what do we want to do? We're just doing kind of a mock exercise, so we can make a function called submit, and we can just console log submitted successfully. Okay, and on our submit, what we can do here is on the form value itself, or on the form tag itself, we can say on submit equals just our callback handle submit. Boom, so now on submit. So what's happening here is we actually need to prevent the default behavior of the browser. So whenever you click a submit button, it's going to want to refresh the page. So one thing that we can do is we can take this event and we can use something called prevent default. So what this is doing is it will prevent the default behavior of the browser of refreshing that page when you click submit. So see now how I'm clicking submit and it's not refreshing the page. That's exactly what we want because we want more control over what the browser will do. If you're building an app, you're going to want to route to a new page or maybe do some other functions on the submit. You don't want it just instantly refresh and then you've kind of like lost your control over what's happening. So in here, we can just call our callback, which is submit. Boom, submitted successfully. Okay, so we have chopped off all of these requirements. Next, we need to figure out how to handle errors and show errors if there are errors. But here's where the magic really comes in. So we are going to create our custom React hook. And now this is why this is so amazing. So custom React hooks allow you to reuse stateful logic in a way where this can be applied to anything across our app. So let's say we have 5 other forms. One takes in user data, one takes in a bank account, one takes in, I don't know, any other kind of information. But the nice thing about forms is that the patterns are almost always the same. You're always going to have a handle change function. Usually on every form page, you'll have some kind of submit function or handle submit function. And why would you just keep writing this over and over in every single form? So this is great because we're going to pull this out into our own custom React hook that follows the same rules as regular React hooks, and we're going to apply them. Basically, if we were building an app, we could apply them anywhere, and I'll show you exactly how to do this. So what we need to do here is, in here we're going to create a new file, and this file is going to be called useForm. So the convention for making your custom React hooks is that you always write use in front of them. So right now we've used useState. There's another common one called useEffect, and these are what the React team is baked in to React. And the community is the one that builds custom React hooks that you can reuse and use wherever. And there's, hopefully with the advent of React hooks, there will be a lot of creative things used with this. And this is just a very simple example of what it can do, but this is why it's so powerful. So we're going to make a file called useForm. And basically, what we're going to do here in useForm is we're going to import useState. So React hooks generally have an internal state, and we're going to pull this in from React, and here we're going to just write out const useForm, and this is going to basically take all of our logic from form. We're just going to place it in there. So these are the three pieces of logic that we have in our form that are stateful, and we're going to drop them right in here. And what we need to do now is we need to actually return what we need to use in our other areas of our app. So we have values. This is a thing that we'll be using in form. We've already seen that. We have handle change, and we currently have handle submit. So what we need to do is just return those, and then we'll export them and pull them out in our main form. So we have handle change, handle submit, and values. And we'll see how this plays in later, but right now we just need to use these three back in here. So now we want a handle submit, we want values, and we want our handle change. Well, how do we access that? So what we can do is we can import useForm from the respective folder. So that's useForm. And now what we can do is we can destructure these values from this file. So we just need to export this, useForm, and now we can take this and say that it's equal to useForm. So this is just destructuring those values from useForm. And when I save it, it formats as so we're pulling out the handle change function, we're pulling out the handle submit, and we're pulling out the values object from useForm. And what is useForm at the end of the day? It's just a function right here. So what we can do here is we had this submit function down here, and to genericize things, we can actually just call it a callback. And we can replace this with callback, and then we can pass it in this function. And now, because this is just a function, we can pass in the callback to useForm. But what is the callback here? It's actually submit. So we can pass in submit here, and this will do the same exact behavior. So let me pull this side by side so you can see a little bit easier how this is working. So we have this right here. This is our useForm custom hook. So useForm takes in a callback. What is our callback? So this is what it takes in the callback, and this is the function that we're now passing in here for this hook to use. So now we are defining our two functions and our values object, and we are returning them in an object from useForm. And what this is if you return something, you can destructure it, and you can pull out exactly what you need. So since we're returning these three things, we're just pulling them out. It's setting them as constants to be used in our form component, and we can now reuse them wherever, which is really, really nice. So now, if we go back to our browser and we type in my email at myemail.com and then a password, submitted successfully. So we've now pretty much fulfilled everything using a custom React hook and making this a really, really clean file. So if we were going to use the setState function or anything else, this would have gotten really long. We would have had to make a class component. We would have had to create an object using state. We would have had to set state. We would have had to write a lot more code, which would have been a lot more complicated and confusing for someone who's just opening this file. Right now, this is really, really clean. So we know that we have a handle change function coming in, a handle submit function, and a set of values. And these values are being placed inside of these inputs. The functions are being passed onto the onChange, and then the handle submit function is being passed to the form. So this is the magic of these reusable hooks. So now if we make any other file or form throughout our app, we can just easily reuse this useForm and have all our functions there. And we can pass in whatever callbacks we need to make API calls or send data to different places, but it can be customized per function, but we've pulled out the common code. Okay, so now the next part is going to be error handling. And this is going to be a little more, I don't know why this keeps importing. So next, we're going to focus on error handling. And this is also made extremely easy, and I'll show you how we can customize our useForm. So next, we're going to be focusing on error handling, and this is going to be insanely easy with our custom hook. So with error handling, what we can do here is basically we need a new state for errors. We need a function that validates these errors, and we need to pass these errors back to form. So now that we have this basically already all written out, we can copy some of our previous logic and use the same exact form for errors as we do up here. So what we can do is say errors, and we can make our setter set errors. So what we're doing is we're making an errors object that's effectively the same structure as our values object, and we'll just use this in the same way. So down here, we have our new state for errors. And what we can do is we can basically, in our submit function, this is where we want to be handling errors. So we need a function that will go through and handle errors for us. And what we can do is we can just make that function here. So we'll say validate login.js, and we have email and we have password. So let's think of some things that apply to general email and password validation. So in an email, you need the string to be more than 0 characters, and then you also need the string to be an email. And the password, you need the password again to be more than 0 characters, and then you need the password to also be probably more than 10 characters. We want our passwords to be strong. We don't want anyone hacking in. So down here, we can make a function, and this is going to be pretty straightforward. So export default function validate, and what does validate take in? Validate takes in our set of values, because we want to check each of these to see if there are errors, and then we're going to set them down here. So this is just going to take in a values object. So now we need to grab all this information, all that pseudocode, and place it up here. And what we need to do is, since we're just returning an object just like this, what we can do is say errors, and then we need to return errors. So we're going to be creating this object and just returning it, and we'll be adding what we need to the object, whichever errors we need to the object. We can say if not values.email. So if this is empty, then we need to say errors.email, and let's just pass in a friendly message. So email address is required. Boom. So basically what this does is it takes this error object and just adds this key, email, and then the error string. And then we can say else if. Now we need to figure out if the string is an email. And pretty much what I've done is I've gone on the web and I found a regex, a regular expression that will go through and just validate if this is an email. So a regex is basically a way of figuring out patterns in strings to see if things are actually what they are. So you can say if something is a website, if something is an email, and they look a little crazy. So I just went on the internet and Google searched one and found one. There are a bunch of different ones you can use. This is a pretty general one. It basically, you look in here, it has the @ symbol and the period. And then it has a whole bunch of other little operators to see if it's an email or not. So the main things are checking to see if this includes the @ or the period, and it's case insensitive. So now there's a method on a regex expression, and it's called test. And what this does is we basically pass in values.email. We're passing in our email to the right side of here. It will compare this to make sure it is validated by that, and then this whole thing resolves to either true or false, which is really, really easy. So we're just trying to say if this does not resolve to that, and what happens is if this and this, if the right and left side are equal, it will just resolve to true. So we can just put in the bang operator here to say if not true. So we're saying if this and this resolves to false, then we need to add an error. Okay, perfect. So now we've basically set our validator, and this needs to be validate. Okay, so now we need to pull validate login into our main form. So import validate login, we'll just drop that in there. So we have validate login, and now we need to figure out how does this integrate with our custom React hook. And again, just like the submit function, what we can do is we can pass this into our useForm. So we have validate login, and we've passed it into useForm. And inside of useForm, it doesn't only just take a callback now, it also takes a validate login function. And what we can do is let's actually call that validate. It makes it a lot more straightforward and reusable. So in this specific form, we'll be pulling in this validate function and passing it into here. Okay, so now inside of our useForm hook, we need to figure out when to validate. And basically, we know we only want to validate, again, when handling the submit function. So what we need to do is we need to set the errors. So we can say set errors, and we just need to pass in the resolution of validate when values is passed in. So what is this? So you pass in values here, it goes through all of this, and it just returns an object, right? And then you just want to set that object up here. So now what we need to do is in our form, we just need to handle our error message. So over here, we need to return errors now, and then we have errors that we can pull up from here. So this is basically just the errors object. We're returning it, and then we're pulling it into our form. And then what we can do is we can say if errors.email, and then we can just use conditional rendering, and then we can place in our error message here. So this is what that string up here will be. And then we can do the same exact thing down here, except with email. So this is password and password. Okay, so now comment that out. And what this does is whenever you submit, it will set the errors and then validate them. So let's try this out. So we should be able to see two errors. So email address is invalid and password is required. So now let's see if we can get that to go away. Boom, so we entered a valid email, it didn't throw an error, but the password is still required. So now we click submit, password needs to be more than 10 characters. So actually what we can do is in our form, you can make another phase called is submitting, and this can separate some of your logic into a different function now. So we can say const is submitting, and then set is submitting. And what this can do is we'll take an initial value of false, and then down here, after set errors, we can say set is submitting, and then pass in true. And that will allow our next phase to actually call the callback. So we want to set the errors and set is submitting. And now what we can do is use another hook, useEffect, and in this useEffect, we can basically say whenever errors are changing, let's figure out if we should call our callback or not. So we don't want our useEffect running when everything is changing. So when we type in here, we don't want our useEffect running every single time for our submit operation. We only want to check to see if our errors are changing. So basically that's saying once errors is submitting, we'll observe errors and see if that's changing. So down here, we can use useEffect, and now throughout any of our apps, you can have multiple, throughout any of our components, you can have multiple useEffect hooks. And this one is going to be pretty straightforward where basically useEffect can take in two arguments. The first one is the callback function that will happen whenever something in our app changes. And the second one is kind of like an observer. You can say only change when X changes. And what we want to do here is say only change when our errors object changes or gets updated. Well, when does that get updated? It gets updated whenever submit is clicked, because we have set errors right here. So this will always be updating our errors object and resetting it to something new. So now inside here, we can just check to see if there are no errors. And then if there are no errors, we can just call our callback. And this is really, really clean. It's really, really easy. And it's decoupled our checking function from our submit function. So now down here, we're going to say if. Now, how do we check if an object is empty? Well, we can pull the keys off of it into an array, and we can check to see if that array is empty or not. That's a really easy way to see if our errors object is empty. So actually up here, because I copied this, we can delete this to be an empty object. So what we just did there is we deleted this, and down here, errors.email will always be undefined initially, so it will never show our paragraph tag. And it will only show if our errors object is populated, and that's only populated when validate login goes through and populates this errors object. So what we can say is if object.keys, and then we need to pass in our errors object, so let's pass in that, and then we say .length equals 0. So that's basically if there are no errors, and if is submitting is true, then we can go down here and we can call our callback. So our callback is this submit function on line 11 in the form, and we basically passed it into useForm here, and down here we are only calling it if errors are changed, and this checks to see if there are no errors. So if we have this object and it's updated to another object that's empty, errors has technically changed, so we've gone in and we've seen if this is empty. It is, so we're calling our callback. So let's clean this up a little bit, pull out all of the comments, and then check. Okay, so test and test. Email address is invalid. Password needs to be more than 10 characters. So test@email.com. We'll just add in a bunch of characters here. Submit. Boom, submitted successfully. So what we can do now is we can make this a little more realistic, which means that we'll highlight the text and have it be red and then have it be a little bit smaller. So what we can do here is we can say class error in our index.css file. We can say font size. We'll just make that be red. And then we can make, font color, so color red, and font size, we'll make that be 10 px. Okay, so now that we have that, we go down here, we say class name error, and then we need to just import that CSS file. Okay, awesome, so we go back here. Boom, and now what we can do is we can add an error class to our input and just make it really easy to shift around. So we want to say input error, and we can say border color, and that's red. So what we can do now is we can use template literals from ES6 to conditionally render our class name, or conditionally add our class name. So we know that we have one called input error, and what we can do is we can do the same thing down here. We can say if errors.email, and then we can just say and let's see, sorry, we're using JavaScript, so we have to add these curly braces around our string. So now we have our string, and then we can just pass in a string of input error. Boom, and let's test that out over here. Awesome, we made it red. You can always make it thinner or do other things to style it, but this is just a really simple example. So then down here, so that's our simple form validation with our custom React hooks. And Again, our React hooks, they're a way to reuse stateful logic throughout different parts of our app. So if we were to have any other forms, we could just pull in this same hook and use all the same functionality, but our initial form is really, really clean. It doesn't have much logic at all showing up here because it's all pulled in from this custom hook. So that's the power of React hooks. They're effectively just functions where you're taking reusable stateful logic and placing them somewhere else, and you're able to use them throughout anywhere in your app. I also have a handful of other React interview question videos on the sidebar here, so make sure to check those out. They go over general React concepts and different things you should know, things that could trip you up during an interview, and also how to approach interview problems. Like, subscribe, and shoot any questions you have down below in the comments. Thanks again.